how, well, I'm a retired educator, so I was very moved by your insight, speaking to truth, so that students can succeed. So my question is, how can others facilitate what you're trying to do with the Innocent Project?
Well, we have a website, innocentclassroom.com. I have some cards. I'd be happy to, we don't have a mechanism by which, but I think if you go on to the website, there is a way of signing up to something. But I can give you my card and I'll communicate with you. Somebody will.
David? Just two quick points. One, I think you put your finger on something very important when at the end you talked about young brother Trayvon Martin just personally feeling tired, just damn tired. This is some bullshit. I'm going to turn to you and say, look, what's up?
Yeah.
What?
Right.
And and that's one of the things that makes me hopeful right now, is that the same power that was bubbling up to the surface like a volcano,
Yeah.
that sparked the civil rights movement, was ultimately all about that. It was about black people everywhere saying, you know what, I am tired. I am tired. I'm not, and that's, that whole chant, I'm fired up, can't take no more, came from, right? Because we were all feeling that. We were all feeling it.
I have no right to say this, but I will say it. I want that movement to formulate an approach that is 21st century.
I feel it.
I don't know what that is.
I feel the rumbling under my feet.
I feel
really
it too.
do. So I know
but
it's
I
coming.
think it's to me it's both an activist practical and an activist theoretical philosophical thing that has to also grow.
Right. So that's the big thing. Is that the only way that the systemic racism that is the real enemy is going to get dealt with. We talk about a national conversation about race, and people aren't really, people aren't real about that at all. They want to make it about a personal thing, that I don't see color thing, and why can't we just all get along, right? The real problem is the systemic racism. And so the only thing that's going to fix that is the only thing that has ever fixed it or challenged it, which is a mass movement. Yeah. And people are tired enough and angry enough, I think, to push it and make it happen. But let's deal with the softer side for a minute. There was something you were talking about, that interpersonal side, from innocent technology. And I'm wondering, here's what I want to throw out to you is, how do we move that business of creating authentic relationships that's happening in schools now because of innocent technologies out into the mass culture? And push that agenda of facing each other, dealing with each other authentically, so we can move beyond this really superficial bullshit place where we've been stuck.
I hear you. Guys, I'm the one. I'm looking over my shoulder. You can answer it. I have to be honest with you. My scope of vision is very narrow right now. For me, it's about the children who are locked in our oppressive environment of our schools. I cannot tell you how bad our school system is. It's not the teachers. This is not a screed against teachers. The system, even teachers know this must be the way you want it to be. Because our schools, the schools where our children are underfunded, under-resourced, but the expectation so anyway, the transformation, so my vision is right there. In terms of taking out into the community, I have stories of working with teachers who work with kids whose parents start to pay attention to what's going on, who come to school and say, what is going on, who learn about innocent classroom techniques and all of that, and who then have interaction with school administrators and say, this is really interesting, and where the administrator can say, we're having an impact on that family. I'm making a case, I don't know how to change big, but we can change small. And if we change small, kids go home. And they go home sometimes to complicated environments, traumatic environments. And if a child starts to believe in themselves and stops buying into the stereotypes, they start not having it with their family. It's like, come on, Mom, I need pencils. We need to have books. Come on, Dad, you can, I need some quiet now. We have had these conversations where kids over time build a relationship with a teacher, start to care about their academic engagement enough to just speak back to the family a little bit. So I hear you, and I don't know, you might have some thoughts about this. I'm not thinking big right now. That's my whole point. I'm thinking really. I'm right here. I'm in Nellie Stone Johnson. I'm in Lucy Lane. I'm in that school, and I'm working with those teachers, and we're going to work with those kids, and we are going to have an impact on the North Side this year. That's. So I'm not pushing aside the question. I think it's a valid question, but the big world is not ready to talk about innocence. It's not, because it's a very scary thing to show up on the street as an innocent person of color.
So what about, I think, maybe the generation of young people a little older than that, who are dropping out of high school or aren't going into college? How do we foster that innocence within them and take the weight of all that guilt?
Who are already out of school?
Or who are already,
Yeah, I know. You and I should, your dad and I should talk, because maybe there is a way that because I need a system. The way that I've conceptualized this, I need a system that allows me to close the door. In a schoolroom, you can close the door, and you can say, because really this all comes down to when a child walks into a room and faces a teacher, and the teacher, their very sight of that teacher throws off anger, throws off frustration, throws off my need for, I feel connected, all of that stress that I'm carrying around, all those stereotypes, all the impact of that negative stereotype gets thrown off simply because I walked into her room. And I get to be with her for 4 hours, and I can just be, or 50 minutes in a high school. And I can be. We don't get to be. So I'm actually understanding that reality as being a much more intense reality and much more in need of this kind of conversation. But you would have to help me understand how I could partition it in such a way that people would go, there's nowhere you have to be. You would have to do this volitionally, but maybe there's a way we could talk about that. I would enjoy a conversation about that. But the reason why I call it the innocent classroom, when I talked about this, there was a police chief, African-American police chief in the room, and he raised his hand and he said, I got 2 kids, one's 14, one's 12. I'm not sure I want my boys to be out on the street innocent. And my first response was not a good one. My first response was, well, how's that working out for you? Because we can ask that of ourselves. How's it working out? Whatever we're doing, whatever you think about how you raise your children, or how they show up on the street, how's that working out? So, but I thought better, and I said, that's why I call it the innocent classroom. Because I can't ask your 16-year-old child to show up innocent on the street, because there'd be a lot more Trayvons than there are, or have been. But I can say, in this room, if you go through the transformation teacher to understand this child's power and beauty and perfection and how it's been messed up by the toxicity of negative stereotypes of American culture, and if you can understand that and help that child take each one off separately when they see you, in this room that child can be innocent and safe.
I just feel like there's a whole generation of, young people, young men of color about my age,
agree.
have completely lost their innocence. You know?
Right, I agree. This
They
is,
gave up all hope on it, and do we just give up on them, or what? How do we?
I haven't, I mean, I hear you. I'm not gonna let this conversation go. I promise you. Because, I mean, the work that I did in hip hop and writing about and thinking, that was where I saw it all solidify. Because part of the way the hegemony, I mean, people don't like hearing the word hegemony and but the part of the way oppression is working now is just filtering through cultural expression. So you don't think you're being told to be hopeless, but we end up, you know, the year I really studied like a gangster kind of thing, hip hop. It was like I probably could have been in jail. You know, there were days when I was angry for no reason. Well, there was a reason. I was told what the reason was, and I was angry. So when I went to respond to this, though, I went to the public school system. It was an opportunity. But I'm game. And I think there are probably some people in this room who would be game to have that conversation about how to address that population group that you're talking about. Because I know, because I taught you, I mean, I've seen you in my class, and I know the power and perfection that you embody. And I know how the system works to put us in situations where we lose touch with that and we buy into the other side. Not that, I mean, I'm not saying it's about you, but I know that that's a part of your generation. I think we can work at that. Oh, and by the way, when he said only people of color, he didn't mean that. He didn't really, you need to clarify that.
What?
You don't only mean people of color can ask questions.
No. No.
Just the first question. Yeah, I mean, cause I'm like, I'll walk out of here.
All right, this is quick. I just, I got touched by your story, Philadelphia, and being raised in the inner city. I'm from Gary, Indiana.
Yeah.
And I moved up here in '92. And when I came here, I'm like, where the hell am I at? Seriously, it was so weird to me.
But it's changed, hasn't it? Since
It's changed a lot, So I said, well, even the laws was different, It's like you can talk to your buddy and say, I beat your butt, just in a playful way. They said that's a terroristic threat. And I'm like, okay, I had to learn the language.
That's right.
I had to learn the people.
That's right.
And I came up here with a drug addiction of 17 years. And I've been clean a month after I got up here through hope and faith in the Lord, and wind up being the vice president of the largest union here in the state. As the only person of color, I've seen that around me every day. How do I change this? I sat on Nellie Stone Johnson board and gave out scholarships, And I say, well, you don't give up hope. Because once you let that fizzle out, you hope less. So I just want to say I appreciate, it is a struggle every day. I have a 3-year-old son. Didn't have a child till I was 50. And I pray with him morning and night and say, son, you're my legacy because I'm uprooting where my father wasn't there for me. And it's easy to take away, the memory of your injustice is more enslaving than the experience itself. So even though you've been unjustified as a child, are you going to continue to carry that over into the next generation? So at some point you got to cut them roofs off. But I just want to thank you, brother.
Appreciate that.
Even when you talk about the anxiety attack, pulling over and trying to put your life back in perspective. Did I just whip around by that cop? But you face your fear. Because if you don't face your fear, fear will stagnate you and kill you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe a couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up.
As a person of color and hopefully as a future writer one day, I'm curious how you dealt with your panic attacks, because I know that many of us are scared. Many of us deal with white people who just don't get us. many of us sit there and fear and have, our hearts are beating out of our bodies, and what do we deal with that? How do we do that? How did you do that?
Now, are you talking about in the process of trying to tell the story, or are you talking about
I'm talking
just
about
life?
daily living, eating at a restaurant, walking on the street, trying to buy something, everything.
I think you have to deprioritize. I mean, it's a process. It takes time. But I think you have to deprioritize the significance that you ascribe to others. We often look at the other people and think, you're doing this to me right now, or I'm feeling this from you right now, or this is having this impact on me. But part of that equation is that we validated them. And so the learning, it's a practice. You have to take little pieces where, why am I responding to you like you matter to me that much? And if you keep doing that, you start to learn how to value people, not from a racial standpoint, but from a damage standpoint. How damaged are you, and how much damage are you trying to do to me? And you start to be able to pick up on that damage coming at you very quickly. And you just either, see, like I said, for a long time, for me it was the bubble. When I would go travel with David said, let's go, we would be in New York. And it's like, we gotta get a cab. I mean, there's only one place I'm getting a cab in New York City. That's in front of the hotel. I'm not walking out in the middle of the street and being run over by these people who don't give a crap about me. Thank God there's Uber now, because they can't stop you. Well, actually, now I know they can, but do you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't keep exposing yourself to that kind of toxicity without a response. So the first response is to not open yourself up to it in such a big way that it just all comes at you. And then to begin to practice learning how to distinguish people quickly who are out to damage you. And they're not doing it maliciously, it's not malicious. And also, to not sort of take it as a malicious attack, but as, like, you have to protect yourself. If you're an artist in this culture, you have to protect that core that is the truth that you have to tell. And so if you let too much poison in, it gets harder and harder to tell the story. So you have to, I don't know, do you?
Well, I would say, one of the things, I just taught at a writers' conference of writers of color. And so many of my writer students of color were talking about the reactions of white readers to their work, saying, well, they won't understand this, or they object to this. And I sat there and said, why do you write to the dumbest person in your audience? And then I said, but the other thing is, when all of you sit there and say, what are white readers, what are white readers? The point is that you're imprisoning yourself. And there's a voice inside yourself.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Is the white reader.
Don't punish yourself.
And you have to dismantle that part of yourself, which is the white reader. And I think the thing about this is this conversation has taken a very different tone than the first two conversations, which I thought are absolutely valuable. But much of this conversation is focused on how we imprison ourselves. And there's reasons, on the society and what the society does to people of color, and we live in a culture of white supremacy, but the place where we can free ourselves is inside ourselves.
It has to be the first place, as far as I'm concerned.
And we can't do any work unless we are constantly working on ourselves.
And I want to come back and make something perfectly clear from my point of view. I don't think all this is racial. Like, the systematic racism spits out these negative things about people that affects the way we come up and grow and become who we are. Systematic racism exists. It's a big, bad thing. But my ability to operate in my day-to-day life is governed by something much bigger and much more powerful than the race of the person I'm engaged with. I care about that thing that is in you that is very similar to the thing that is in me. And it's only when your culture or your racial identity gets in the way between that and me and you, do I have to pay attention to what your race is. I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? And because this is what I am helping, I want teachers to understand about my children, our children. It's like they can't use race as a reason why I can't teach these children there. I don't know where they come from. I didn't grow up like this. That's not a good enough excuse. Our children are beautiful and wonderful and perfect, and all you have to do is figure out a way to get there. Just like I have to figure out a way to get there with you. It's a challenge that we're all confronted with. Our culture confuses us. It wants to divide us. I know you were going to ask me about multiculti, and if you had it would have been, there was a time in this community, I feel like it's coming back, where people who are Asian American and African American, Native American, Hispanic, and Latino, and now maybe even the GLBTQ communities, at that point, we're all beginning to come together. About 20 years ago. And then funders started funding one group this much money and another group this much. This is what Multiculti Boho Sideshow is about. And it broke us apart. And it set us back a whole period. And then there's Miss Saigon Part 2, Part 3, right? And it's like a rebuilding of the same energy that we had gotten started back in the, you remember. Mm-hmm. And we have to, so it's like we have to be focused on what is good about us and how our goodness can be joined and alliances made and progression. I mean, to me, progression is only going to happen as we form alliances, and if we're preoccupied with racial difference, those alliances become much more complicated.
I think that's a good place.
Wait, no, he's got one more. He's been holding.
Okay,
he's holding the mic.
Oh, he's holding the mic. Okay, one more question.
So I really relate to what you're talking about in terms of sort of alienation and the sort of isolation that's felt. And I feel like one of the major antidotes to hopelessness is community, is a sense of solidarity. However, for myself, as a black person and as a black atheist, I've found that to be quite a struggle. And to sort of establish.
Did you grow up
that.
here?
I grew up in Iowa/St. Louis.
Okay.
And I found that to be quite a struggle. And so I'm wondering what your experience has been with overcoming that sense of alienation or isolation, both outside of the black community and within it.
Yes. Wow. That isolation is real, first of all. You have, I know there are a number of people of color in this room who are artists and who feel isolated. But there are also a growing number of artists in this room and people who are engaged, who are building community. That's sort of what I was trying to say just a minute ago. It's like every time we get going and building viable communities, and by viable I mean communities in which you feel comfortable with, that communities that accept you for who you are and what you bring to the table, are not trying to force you to be something else in order to be with them, but simply a community. I really loved your labeling yourself as a black atheist. That's a new one for me. That somebody, when you feel like you have to actually say that. When I first moved here, it's like if you didn't, when they took you on a tour, because I was coming here to get a job, they took you on a tour and said, well, first of all, there are no black neighborhoods. That was the first thing they told me. This is late 80s. No black neighborhoods. And here's where Pilgrim Baptist Church is. And here's where, I forget what the other church is. It's like, that's what we were supposed to know. Everything, you figure it out after that. And because you're gonna live in Coon Rapids anyway. No offense to anybody who lives in Coon Rapids. How could you have a place called Coon Rapids? And how could you be a black person who lived there? But there are black people who live in. Okay, stop. This is really going to be on YouTube.
We can cut off the last bit.
I think it's about, I don't know how long you've been here, but I think it is about finding the community that really does welcome you. But there is a lot of isolation, and part of that is it's a good time to be busy, right? As a writer, for me, it was that isolation that usually all these books I wrote, I had nowhere to go. You can't do some of the art that people do, that I do, hanging out anyway. So I there was, this will be the last thing, I don't want to take any more time, but I used to think of myself in exile here. It's like I didn't have enough money to go to Paris. So I looked at Minneapolis as my exile. And for a long time, that thing about the outlaw and not answering the front door, and that was real for me. I wouldn't wish that on anybody because that's too isolated. But I think, are you an artist? Yeah, so your time will come when you can't hide anymore. But during that time when you're making that adjustment, it's a good time to be productive. Thank you. I really appreciate your presence. Thank you, David.